everything's connecting now. Good morning from the West Coast, everyone. There's a webinar I'm about to plug us into. It's already started, but just making sure that the stream is up everywhere. Got my coffee ready too. It's for those of you unaware, I've been doing a lot of live streaming lately, and let's just say it's been a very long week. Okay. All right. I think we're good. Just double check the audio. Wrong microphone. Yeah. Okay. This should be the right microphone. All right. Let's give me a different plugin. All right. So I'm just gonna get to it. I should sound right. So the webinar I'm going to be tuning into is by the Apartment Owners Association of USA, but they're locally based here in Los Angeles. They fight for property rights and homeowner rights and all that. So this was a kind of a last minute thing because I'm about to jump in because Attorney Dennis Block will be presenting on what is called the Just Cause Ordinance registration that went into effect for Los Angeles and what that all means for property owners. I titled this stream how Los Angeles continues punishing home ownership, while this is something that for those of you outside of LA or even California might not think that's all important. That's not the case because where Los Angeles, well, where California goes, so goes the rest of the country, and you're about to see just how crazy things are. But before I get into any more of that, this thing on the screen here is the $1 Million Trade Show and Landlording Conference that is coming to Los Angeles. This is coming April 16th. It's a one-day trade show thing. So there's a lot of speakers. Dennis Block's going to be one of them. Yours truly might be at this place too. So just FYI, if you're in the area, this is free. You only pay for parking. That's at the LA Convention Center, Staples Center and all that. So it's a place. They do it twice a year. This one's in Los Angeles for the spring, and later on in the fall, they're going to be most likely in Long Beach. They kind of just bounce between those two locations for the past few years. So they do it twice a year. A lot of things to learn. Okay, and the big ones are for property owners to be up to date with what's going on. Okay, so if you don't know about this or anything else, just go over to AOAUSA.com so you can learn more about this. Register from there too. Again, it's free. There's excellent popcorn, and I also did an episode with the president of the AOA USA last year when we were combating rent control. And that episode is called Property Owner Resources and No on California Proposition 33. Guest AOA USA's Jeff Fowler. So Jeff Fowler is currently speaking right now, and he's about to introduce Attorney Dennis Block. So we're about to jump in, but just to give you an FYI about what's occurred in whatchamacallit, Los Angeles since the fallout with the fires, not to mention the COVID restrictions and things like that. They're really punishing homeowners, and those that have lost everything in the fires are selling it to private equity firms because those are the ones that are come in buying up the property. And LA wants to rebuild with in an equitable way. What that all means is just that there's going to be a lot more expensive units. There's going to be a lot more supposed housing for low income to homeless individuals, and they're going to supposedly be sharing space with these buildings that are supposed to house everybody else. That pays into these high expensive luxury apartments, but they want to do affordable housing at the very minimum, some of these units and things like that, and that has not been playing out too well in LA. And right now, I just got pinged that the Los Angeles City is about to do its discovery for landlord presentation. It's really just a lynching of homeowners and telling tenants how to best them. Well, it looks like Dennis Block is speaking now, so I'm going to close that tab and open this up. Dennis Block is an eviction attorney, probably one of the biggest here in California, serves Southern California, and let's see what he has to say about these just cause eviction ordinances going into effect.
3:15 in the afternoon, you'll get to see me speak, and I'll have a booth there, and we have handouts, etc. So
That's the conference you were referring to.
To our $1 million trade show coming up on April 16th. Also, on this meeting here, we have people in YouTube Live, we have people in the Zoom meeting. If you are in the Zoom meeting, I suggest that you electronically raise your hand now, because at the end of the present, actually call on you and keep your camera on. We'll be able to see what you look like. Also, if you're in the YouTube Live, you can list your questions, and Jeff will read the questions. And
Yeah, so they're streaming live to YouTube. They're taking questions from the YouTube comments and Facebook. It looks like they're also on Zoom. That's how important this thing is. They're streaming to other places that I'm not, and I'm trying to signal blast this to everybody else that is not aware of AOA USA.
block are not the opinions necessarily of the apartment association or our good friend Jeff Fowler, because what I'm about to say certainly will be my own personal opinions, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so what's going on now? The city of Los Angeles has passed an amendment to their Just Cause ordinance, and that deals with the fact that it's forcing all residential property owners to register their units. All property owners, residential property owners, now have to register your units. Before, if you were under the rent stabilization ordinance, that is properties built prior to October 1st, 1978, unless you were a single family home, you had to register your unit. But now they've come back and they have now created this just cause ordinance. That was a couple of years ago. And now the amendment requires every single residential unit that is not under RSO. Now you have to register that unit. So you know that Brentwood house that you're leasing out for $45,000 per month? Well, guess what? You've got to register that unit. Let's pretend that you don't even lease the unit. You still got to set up an account, and you still have to register your unit. So what was the point of the Los Angeles City Council and our wonderful Mayor Beth in instituting this amendment to the Just Cause Ordinance? And it's very simple. It's just a total money grab. That's the only reason why they have created this situation, because now every single residential unit that wasn't under RSO now has to be registered. And guess what? You have to pay a fee for every single. So the money coming into the city based on this boondoggle, which has no reason to exist, and I'll go into that, will be for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is our city is facing a big deficit, and they figure, oh, well, let's pick a target. Well, who's the target, ladies and gentlemen? It's only one target, and that's up and down the state of California, but certainly in LA County and certainly in the city of Los Angeles, and that is income property owners. We're the villains because merely we provide a service. We're allowing housing providers for people who are in need of housing, but yet we're the villains. So let's start with a little bit of history. Rent control started in the city of Los Angeles in 1979. And I know it because I was practicing law and representing landlords at the time. And all economists agree that the institution of rent control only makes prices go higher. It is true. And that's because when you institute rent control, you have a shortage of housing units. And when you have less supply, then you have more demand. And that's the way it works in economics. In fact, they've done studies that even in LA County, the cities that didn't have rent control, like where my office is right now in Burbank, a civilized place to own property, I might add. If you those units, those cities that didn't have rent control, their rents were lower than those cities that had rent control. So if the politicians were really trying to make more affordable housing, the last thing you do is to have a rent control. But of course, logic never befalled on the members of the city council or our mayor. Now, every time a city institutes rent control, you have to have another statute dealing with good cause to evict. I mean, logically speaking, If you didn't have that statute where you require good cause to evict, in other words, you just can't serve a 30-day notice or a 60-day notice to vacate on a month-to-month tenancy. You have to have good cause to evict, because if you didn't, the city belief is that landlords would easily circumvent rent control by just serving a notice to quit. So therefore, you had to have good cause to evict. So the city invented rent control back in 1979, and it affected all residential units with these exceptions. It only applied to units built before October 1st, 1978. So then you were under LA rent control. The only exception was if you had a single family residence. And under the rules for RSO, the Rent Stabilization Ordinance, you had to register your units, and you were limited in terms of what rents you could charge. If your property was built after, obviously you didn't have to register your unit and you weren't subject to any kind of rent control. Okay, let's move forward in history again. And now we're going to go to March of 2020. Well, guess what happened? There was a national disaster in March of 2020, and it dealt with the concept of COVID. So, of course, the city of Los Angeles and most municipalities in the state of California decided that because of this national emergency, it was necessary to put the financial responsibility of the harm that this caused by this disaster solely on the shoulders of income property owners. Solely on the shoulders of income property owners. No other industry had to face the financial disaster that income properties had to face. Again, our industry singled out like no others. If you don't believe that, well, number one, if you had properties in, for example, in the city of Los Angeles during the COVID period, you were not entitled to a rent increase for 4 years. And that's notwithstanding the fact that we had tremendous inflation during that period. What other industry during the COVID period told the purveyors of those industries that you couldn't raise prices? What industry was that? Oh, I know, no other industry. So we were totally
Amen.
singled out for that. In fact, what other industry was told that you couldn't enforce your contract rights? Let's think about it. Oh, I know. It was only income property owners, because we weren't allowed to do an eviction based on non-payment of rent, unauthorized persons, or animals during this period. The losses sustained by income property owners during the COVID period was staggering. And then begrudgingly, the city of Los Angeles, 3 years after COVID was actually over and did not impact anybody, begrudgingly, they finally opened up the floodgates and allowed landlords, in this case, a lousy 4% rent increase for RSO properties, and allowed us to go forward with evictions finally. So what did they do? In the face of finally allowing things to get to normal, they started something called the Just Cause Ordinance that was instituted on January 27, 2023. And that impacted all other units, including single-family homes, regardless of when it was built, regardless of who owned it, a corporation or an individual. All other homes that weren't under the RSO were now subject to JCO, the Just Cause Ordinance, okay? So you had to have good cause to evict your tenant. Okay, so I've got this single family home and it's in Brentwood. I've got a tenant in possession and I want to sell my house. Sounds reasonable. People want to sell their homes, correct? So of course the tenant's on a month-to-month tenancy. And I'm going to serve him with a notice to quit, 60-day notice. He's been there longer than 1 year. If he wanted to leave, he could legally leave. He'd just have to serve us with a 30-day notice to leave. But as you see, under JCO, the Just Cause Ordinance, that's not a ground to evict. You're kidding me. No, I'm not kidding you. You need good cause to evict, and I want to sell my house is not a cause to evict. You can evict, of course, for non-payment of rent, violations of the rental agreement, like they brought in extra dogs or something like that, or people. But you have to have specific grounds, and incredulously, you have to have specific cause, and that is not that I want to sell my house. So you've got all these people out there with tenants in possession. Now, it used to be that you could ask a tenant to move on the basis, this is for JCO properties only. You could ask the tenant to move because you wanted to do major renovation. Well, guess what? About 2 weeks ago, the city council and our wonderful mayor, and I use that term very loosely, uh, stated that that is now not a cause to evict, that you want to renovate your unit. That is now not a cause to evict. Now, they created some more laws under this ridiculous JCO, the Just Cause Ordinance. And that is that anytime, and this is for any residential unit in the city of Los Angeles, you have to upload that termination notice. So if you're serving a termination notice on one of your tenants, like a notice to pay rent or quit, or a notice to perform or quit, you have to serve that notice by uploading it to the city. You've got 3 days to do it. And if you don't do it, that's considered a complete defense in an unlawful detainer action. So why did the city institute that law where you have to upload these notices to the city? Obviously, you would believe that they want to check the notices to make sure that you're in accordance with the law, and they could obviously send you a notice that you're not. But you see, I've been in contact with the Los Angeles Housing Department, many of their staff members. And do you know what they do with regard to all the notices that are uploaded that you have to upload within 3 days to have a decent case for eviction? Do you know what they do with it? Nothing. They don't look at it at all. So on what basis would you want us to upload all these notices to the city if the city is not reviewing these notices and not doing anything with it? It's very simple. They want to have tenants' attorneys have a defense. So they create a law for no particular reason that if you walk on the right side of the street versus on the left side of the street, you can be fined. But there's no way anybody's going to know this. And there's no reason for that, what side of the street you walk on. If you're not going to review these notices, what is the point in having us upload these notices to the city? It's just a boondoggle for landlords to lose their cases and, quote, more and more tenant protection. But it gets better. Remember, if your property is under the Just Cause Ordinance, that doesn't really involve rent increases. You can raise the rent to whatever is legal. There you do have some limitations with regard to if your property is under statewide rent control. But for example, if your property is a single-family home, a townhouse, or a condominium, then you have no rent limitations. You can raise the rent to whatever you like, whenever you like. I don't care who owns it, a corporation or REIT, makes no difference. If it's a single-family home, a townhouse, or a condominium, you can raise the rent to whatever you like. So, okay, what's another part of this wonderful JCO, which is totally illegal? And that is something called economic displacement. Economic displacement. What the hell could that be? Well, I'm ready to tell you. If you raise your rent, and you have the right to do it, more than 8.9%, then that triggers economic displacement. So if in fact your tenant says, you know what, you're raising my rent, I know you have the right to do it, but you know what, it's too high and I'm just going to leave. And you're thinking to yourself, well, that's great. I'm very happy that you want to leave, okay? But then he's going to say, well, where's my relocation money? And you say, what are you talking about? I'm just raising your rent. Pay it or leave. I don't care. Well, you see, the city of Los Angeles created this economic displacement chart, which means if the tenant says, I don't want to pay the rent and I'm going to move, you have to pay him relocation. So what's the relocation? If it's a single family home, it's 1 month's rent. If it's a 1-bedroom apartment, It's $7,654. If it's a two-bedroom apartment, it is $9,286. Well,
This is
this is
insane.
insane. For a three-bedroom, it's $11,416. Why do I have to pay my tenant money relocation if I have the right to legally raise the rent? And the answer is there is no justification. This is just another boondoggle by the city of Los Angeles to put so much financial pressure on landlords because they sell their buildings. And it is my belief the reason why they do that is because the city and the county want you to sell your buildings. And why do they want you to sell your buildings? Because then it'll get reassessed and you'll be paying more property taxes. And they really only want big corporations to own your buildings. And they're trying to corner the market. Remember, I said this was Stemsbach's opinion only. They wanted to corner the market so that they're only dealing with the big institutions. But that's what they created when they made this JCO, the Just Cause Ordinance. But does it get worse? And of course it does. They came up with something called the fair market value, which affects not only RSO properties, but it affects JCO properties. It also impacts properties that are in unincorporated area of LA County. So what is this story all about? Well, let's pretend you have a
How
one-bedroom
is this?
apartment and the rent is $2,000 per month. And the tenant doesn't pay you March's rent. So you go to the OA website and you fill out their 3-day notice form, which is excellent, I might add, and steers you into not making a mistake.
Sarcasm.
And then you file it with the city because you listen to this broadcast and you knew to upload it to the city. And then you filed your lawsuit. Well, guess what? You've already lost. Well, how is that possible? The guy owes me the money, it's $2,000. But you see, they created something called the fair market value threshold. The fair market value threshold. And I know what you're thinking. What the hell is that? Well, I'll tell you. You can't serve a 3-day notice unless the notice exceeds the fair market value threshold as established by the Housing and Urban Development. So for a one-bedroom apartment, the fair market value for this year is $2,006. For a two-bedroom apartment, it is $2,625.
What?
For a three-bedroom, it's $3,335. So in my example, the rent was $2,000 for a one-bedroom apartment. But the threshold, did I get that right? The threshold is, oh, I'm sorry, the threshold is $2,081. So on that basis, I can't serve a 3-day notice. Well, then how am I ever going to serve it? Well, you're going to have to wait till April. So in April, he'll owe you $4,000. Now you're finally
Wow.
above the threshold. So now you have the legal right to go forward with an eviction. No other city in California has this except for the city of Los Angeles and the unincorporated LA County. And that's why Jeff is going to send to you at the end of this broadcast how to have Mayor Bass mayorship revoked so we can get her out of office. Make sure you have that ready, Jeff, okay? So in any event, we have to go through the fair market value. And by the way, I always talk about if you have a Section 8 tenant, forget ever trying to evict them based on non-payment of rent, because we all know under Section 8, you have subsidized housing, so the tenant's only paying a small portion of the total rent.
Yeah.
And if his portion is only $200, before you got there, you'd have to wait 11 months. So the city, in effect, has banned evictions for non-payment of rent for Section 8 tenancies because you'll never get above the threshold.
That's crazy, man.
Now, remember when I started off with the original rent control ordinance, I said that logically, if you're forced to do a rent control ordinance, logic would say you'd have to have good cause to evict. Because otherwise you just tell the tenant to move and you could easily get around it. So anytime you're of the persuasion of starting a rent controlled statute, then you have to have good cause to evict. But what's the rationale of having good cause to evict if I'm not relegated to limiting your rent increases? If I'm not relegating to limiting your rent increases, why do I need just cause to evict? Why would a landlord want to have some tenant moving out if I could charge whatever I want? I mean, unless the tenant's a nuisance or something, that there's no justification for it. I'm not trying to get around the system because there is no system to get around. I'm not limited by rent increases.
Mm.
So on that basis, why would you have the just cause ordinance? Well, that gets back to my opening topic, and that is it's just a money grab. Our city is in high deficit right now, without having any water and fire hydrants, I might add, to the chagrin of those people in the Pacific
I know.
Palisades.
It's
But yet
ridiculous.
money grab so that they can use money for projects that I don't believe anybody in this city wants. So this new Just Cause Amendment started exactly 2 years after the Just Cause Ordinance. The Just Cause Ordinance started January 27, 2023, and incredulously, the amendment 2 years later, January 27, 2025. So what does this lousy amendment talk about? Well, this requires that all units subject to JCO be registered and pay a fee. Oh, really? What's the fee? $31.05. So if I have a 20-unit building that was built in 1980, subject not to RSO, but subject to JCO, you're going to have to pay $31.05 for each of those 20 units. So that's around, what is that, around $620 approximately. Now, if your unit is not leased or is maybe owner occupied, or you put your daughter in one of these units, then you're forced to file a yearly exemption. You've got to go online and file a yearly exemption. Now, I know landlords were getting this letter, or property owners. I don't even want to say landlords. So I'm going to show you what the letter looks like right now. So bear with me. Did I do it? I think so. So that's the letter right there.
No.
And this is what
No,
landlords
it's
were
not
getting. They said, why am I getting these letters
Yeah.
that talk about the Just Cause Ordinance? Okay. Well, you got these letters because you have property in the city of Los Angeles that they know is not under RSO, because they know which those are. So they sent these out to property owners. And even though you are living in the unit yourself, or the unit is not registered, or the unit is vacant and you don't, or maybe you have two residences, okay? So the people who got this were people that the address of the premises was different from where the tax statement is mailed from the county assessor's office. So that was the secret. They mailed it out to anybody whose address on the deed, the mailing address on the deed, differed from the property address. So everybody got this and they didn't know what to do with it. And then they're told that they had to, they were told that they had to register their units. So there was a website they told in this letter here, and the website is the Housing Bill, one word, .lacity.org/billing. Once again, housingbill.lacity.org/billing. So they told you to go there and register the unit. And then, because of the boondoggle of the city, when you're trying to register the unit, they said you needed a statement number. But they didn't give you a statement number. And then they were telling you that the deadline was February 28th, which they've now elongated to the end of April now. So now you have to wait
DEI,
for the
man.
city to send you a statement. And when they send you a statement, then you can finally register, because now I have a statement number, and then you can either pay the $31.05 per unit, or you can say you're exempt for the reasons listed, that it's either not rented, it's vacant, or it's owner occupied, or a family member occupied.
So stupid.
Okay. So, and by the way, if you're desperate to get a statement, if you send, my clients have told me, if you send a letter to the Los Angeles Housing Department, an email, and saying, I need a statement number, they will send that back to you. So this is what we're faced with, that you're going to have to register the unit. Now, the fact that you didn't get it based on the way the law states, because the address of the property is the same mailing address on the deed, the fact that you didn't get it, okay, deals with the fact that it doesn't mean that you still have to register your single family home that you're living in. If you get a single family home, I would never be a landlord. I don't care about being a landlord. I've lived in this house for 20 years. Based on the way this idiotic, insane law was written, you still have to register that unit. So what's the penalty if you don't register the unit? What's that penalty? It's 150% of what the registration fee is. So that would be $31.05 for the registration fee. And then 150%, which is about, I don't know, $46. So this is absolutely insane. However, I am proud to tell you that the city does have a justification for why they're charging these JCO fees and why they're asking you to register your units. And they do have a stated purpose, and I'm going to read that to you. So here we go.
Oh boy.
The JCO fee provides programming services and related
homelessness,
expanded tenant protection for tenants citywide, and it is administered by the city. That's their justification. Now, I don't know about you, but I have no idea what I just read. You have any idea what I just read? I don't. I'm going to read it again. Yeah. The JCO fee provides program services and related expended tenant protection for tenants citywide, and it is administered by the city. I don't know about you. I can understand English. I don't know what that says. I don't know what it's going to be about. But what they're talking about, it's going to fund investigations into tenant harassment claims against their landlords. Tenant harassment claims. So that if a tenant files an harassment claim, which the city has this procedure for doing it, then the city can go out there and check it out to make sure that the landlord is not harassing the tenant and possibly fine the landlord for harassing that. What they need is they need a tenant harassment against the landlords is what they need. That's the ones who are being harassed. I can tell you this on a daily basis from my clients as to who the harasser are and who's the harassee in these types of situations. But I do want to let you know that for the last 3 years, it was reported in the Los Angeles Times as of August 19, 2024. For the 3 years prior to that, there have been, and this is legitimate, reported by the LA Times, and we know what an honest publication that is. I'm just waiting for Jeff to laugh. There have been 13,000 complaints of complaints about landlords. Tenants have complained 13,000 times in the last 3 years, and that's actually kind of a sizable number. However, let's move on. Of those 13,000 complaints, the city found that the landlord harassed the tenant 4 times.
Wow.
4 times out of 13,000. You can imagine how landlords were harassed by having to defend themselves by these phony harassment claims, where only 4 out of 13 were found to be valid. Getting the city attorneys involved, only 4 got fired. So why does the city need to register your unit to grab all this extra money? Because they say they need to enhance tenant protection because of all these harassments, when there isn't harassment on this. What is the point of that?
To punish us.
So make no mistake, there's only one reason why this was created. And again, it's just a total money grab by Mayor Bass and the City of Council because they're facing a deficit. And look at all the more money that is going to come into the coffers of the city so that they can spend it on pet projects which do nothing for nobody, including if your house is burning down, that you can't even get protection from the fire department. And I want to end this with the following. Shame on you, Mayor Bass and the City of Council of Los Angeles. You do no good for the city. There is no social services that you provide of any quality for the citizens here. And as I always say, the best thing to do is get out of Dodge. And with that,
Here,
Mr.
here.
Jeff Fowler, we can open it up to questions.
I'm gonna
Wow,
mute it
there's some
here for a little bit. So, highly recommend. Let me remove the captions so you guys can see the contact information for Dennis Block right there. So if you're in Southern California, particularly Los Angeles, Orange County, Ventura County, and such, he is someone to contact. He's one of two eviction attorneys that I'm very well familiar with. I haven't needed to use their services, thank God for that. But if I do, there's only one of two. That's Dennis Block, and the other one being Michael Brennan. We've met in person. Dennis Block is actually a lot taller than I expected. I think he's slightly taller than me, and the guy is like 76, almost 80. No, the guy's up there in age, but yeah, everything they said, I have zero disagreements with because it's absolutely true. The problem that we have, and I was trying to mention before, I had to chime into the or plug into the live stream was that I get invited every now and then. I've only been to one of these. So as we were going to go live, I received the invitation from Los Angeles to participate in what is called, let me get the right wording here. Oh, come on, it was right here. Probably went to a different email. Where'd the email go? Yeah, come on, come on, come on. It's Los Angeles virtual landlord and tenant a workshop. And so I attended one of them. And I got to tell you, it wasn't even any workshop to supposedly help landlords into relations with tenants. It was more, hey, tenants, this is how you get the landlords because shame on them. So it was like a 1.5 hours of just lynching us homeowners or property owners, income property owners and such. You know, what he highlighted here, and I expected him to do that, and I'm so glad he did. By the way, go follow Dennis Block's own YouTube channel. Every Saturday, he does this landlord tenant radio. It evolved considerably because I figured it would. He started doing live streams, like Zoom calls, for like an hour on a Saturday. I think Saturday afternoons, and then it's replayed like on Sunday and after that. So it was just meant as a thing, like, well, you know, just to inform people, kind of like these talk show hosts would go on the radio and have a specific thing, like, you know what, this is not legal advice, but this is legal discussion stuff. Just call in, but you know, it's just an opinion, it's not legal advice kind of thing. So he started doing that. He can do that because he's licensed to do it, but he just started to do it as a courtesy to the homeowners that are just being gouged by LA with their taxes, or Sacramento altogether too. So I knew he was going to highlight it. So go follow his channel so you can get more questions and stuff up to date. Every now and then he does participate here with the AOA USA because Jeff Fowler, they're good friends, and I'm acquainted with Jeff Fowler here as well, the one on screen on the left hand side. Well, what you're seeing here at play normally, I guess let me further explain what he said, something about rent control, because some of you living in blue cities and in blue states might be familiar with this. Usually the bigger metropolitan areas, you're likely to run into rent control. The state of California was the first state to get what is called a statewide rent cap. Many people say that California was the first to have rent control. If it had rent control in the sense that people say it, then we wouldn't be fighting rent control propositions every single election cycle, which we just defeated, which is why I had Jeff Fowler, the AOA USA's president, on the show last year, because we needed to defeat Proposition 33. I thought for sure we were going to lose that battle because we had a mass exodus of people with means and abilities that had property here that just couldn't take it anymore, ended up leaving for greener pastures. And I thought we don't have enough people to combat Prop 33, especially after this big old movement to rile up the tenants because the rent's too damn high, especially after COVID and this and that. And I was shocked that we defeated it. So like, thank God for that. But there's still more education that's needed, and this fight continues because it's nothing new. This has been every single election cycle. There's a statewide rent control proposition that's always being offered up, and usually financed by the same AIDS Foundation. I don't know why an AIDS Foundation is spending money to punish property owners and just control rents and all that. None of it makes any sense, and that should be investigated. Honestly, I've called for an investigation of whoever's running the AIDS Foundation and why they're spending so much money instead of what they're supposedly for, and they're investing it here to try to establish Marxist policies because they want to eliminate private property in this state. Okay, so let me explain real quick. What is rent control? See, the proper terminology is called rent stabilization ordinance. Okay, rent control is basically a part of that, but to simplify a lot of things, we'll just call it rent control. But there's multiple aspects to this, and my goodness, there's so many different organizations and agencies that have the power to tax you that you probably didn't even know about. This is why I say it. Look, I am a Trump supporter. Okay, I've been a Trump supporter since 2016. I'm glad that he won 3 times in a row, but he gets to serve his second term this time around. I don't need to know every single little thing that he's doing. Okay? I voted for the guy, let him do his job. His cabinet spending way too much time on freaking Fox News interviews. Pam Bondi, do something besides trying to be dolled up and just appear on Fox News interviews. How many interviews has she done? 1,000 ever since she got appointed? We need to get things done, drain the swamp, blah, 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 do all that. But the media and the MAGA influencers and all that are just focusing so much on just Trump this and Trump that and run interference and carrying water when they should be holding him accountable too, the entire administration. So why do I bring that up? Is because that doesn't affect me like what's happening locally. What's happening locally is the most important thing you should be paying attention about. I wish people cared as much about local matters as they do for Washingtonian politics. Washington is a circus, a sideshow. It's meant to distract you, smoke and mirrors, because the stuff that's affecting you, taking your property away, taxing, and basically taking your income away, are the stuff locally. How did LA become so Marxist? Because we were so distracted by what's going on over there. And now we're trying to fix something and we don't even know where to begin in some cases. Rent control's been around for decades, and they just keep trying to make it stronger and cap here and cap there. The system has failed, but they keep trying to, like, you know what, let's just do this to, plug a hole in the system here. No, get rid of the system. It doesn't work. Rent stabilization ordinance in 1970 whatever was introduced as a way to supposedly keep rental rates down and also control homelessness, because if you can get to afford your rent, that means you will not be out on the streets. The opposite is true. We have the most expensive rental rates in the country here in Los Angeles, and we're the homeless capital of the country. It's a failed experiment. But more cities have been doing it, and California established a statewide rent cap. But here's the most egregious part about the statewide rent cap, okay? The statewide rent cap basically was just like, okay, you can't raise your rent beyond this percentage plus, what do you call it? Consumer price index, which is adjusted for inflation every single year. So you got to do this. That's what a rent control is, like basically a price cap. And that's what the state did with AB 1482. The reason that was egregious is because the previous year in the election, there was a proposition to do just that, and the people said no. So the state legislature, which is super liberal majority, what did they decide? They said, you know what, the people got it wrong. So let's do this. And Gavin Newsom signed it in October 1942, October 2019, AB 1482. And I was present at that California Association of Realtors meeting, where they were partly responsible for that muck-up that allowed for state legislators to vote wrongly on this thing, okay? And instead of actually trying to turn back the clock and fight this thing later, basically the legal minds at CAR were saying, well, nothing we could do about it now. It's like, no, you put the money in, you screwed it up, fix it. And they didn't. So it's like, dude, how is it that I'm paying into a trade union is supposed to be looking after the client base that we're supposed to be informing, and here you are screwing them over? Because all Californians were screwed over because of that. And then they gave her Proposition 19 because CAR lied. So yeah, I have my issues with the trade union. A lot of problems with them, and they're trying to right the ship. But dude, there's so much damage they've already done, and some of that's permanent. It's exhausting. Well, anyway, back to the focus on rent control. So let's take Los Angeles as the prime example, because under Sacramento, there's San Jose, San Francisco, Santa Monica. Who else are around here? San Diego? Parts of San Diego. Okay. What is a rent stabilization ordinance? There's multiple factions to this. There's the price cap. That's the rent control part. The second one is the institution of bureaucracy that oversees the tenant protections, supposedly, and that is in the form of a community development or a housing department or both, as LA has. And on top of that, they also tend to get building and safety involved. But building and safety gets involved to do code enforcement of the housing inspection. So there's multiple inspections, and you're paying for the inspections if you're the property owner. So as a property owner, you have to pay for the inspections after you register your unit because you have an income producing unit. So what are all these fees for? Supposedly, the registration is supposed to be paying for the services to manage all this, a thing that we didn't ask for, it was imposed on us. And then secondly, because you're paying for the annual inspections for safety and health and safety inspections. Okay, and these inspectors are not from building and safety. Building and safety are supposed to go by the building code, what's permissible, what isn't permissible, based on safety regulations and all that in the building code. Okay, no, the housing inspectors are activists, so they will go in there and ask for things that contradict what the building inspectors say. But because they cited it, and now you as the property owner have it's the onus is on you to get it fixed. Now you got to get the Department of Building and Safety involved. And you have to fix the problem, because even if the building inspector comes over and says there's nothing wrong here, you're right, they're wrong, you as the property owner need to fix this. I'm speaking from experience, okay? All right. So that's the other aspect of it, the bureaucracy, the big monster that balloons in all this, okay? There's a third aspect to this. That is tenant services. Tenant protections are one thing, tenant services are a whole other thing. In Los Angeles, LA provides counsel. They provide legal defense for the tenants to go on like a rent strike against the property owners. And there are judges, a 3-judge panel that oversees these cases. And the landlord pays for all of it. This is insane. Everything has to be paid for by the property owner. And in emergencies like what he described in COVID, LA was so egregious that you couldn't raise the rent for 4 freaking years. And how do you collect the rent from someone that owes all that back pay? Oh, well, you can go to a small claims court. Problem with small claims, it's a maxed out amount. If it's over 10,000, now you got a civil case, you got to go to a trial. Like an actual jury, it's no longer a small claims case. But the tenant is gone. They left. As soon as they got the opportunity, they would leave. Like these people, the irresponsible tenants that wouldn't pay their rent and taking advantage of these rules, they were buying up new stuff. Often all these Amazon boxes would be arriving, or a new car and things like that, but they wouldn't pay their rent because, oh, COVID. It's like, what? No. Meanwhile, during COVID, you couldn't raise the rent. You couldn't charge the rent because it was a rent freeze. It was both a rent freeze and an eviction moratorium. You couldn't kick out a person that wasn't paying their rent, and you couldn't evict them because we had a health emergency. Never mind that the health emergency wasn't killing the homeless. That's another story. But here's the thing. There's that notice of tenant right to counsel. That's what I was just talking about. That's what's being handed out by these housing community development department thingies to the tenants to inform them, just like that a workshop that I keep getting invited to. I only went there once, but it was just to punish us. I'm like, what? Screw this. I thought I was here to, we're building bridges. Instead, you're just trying to shame me. Like, screw this. So I don't participate in any of those whatsoever. I did push back against some of that, but I'm like, dude, this is pathetic. I'm not going to waste my time on this. So as a property owner, you're forced to do you're forced to pay for your own demise, basically. And a mom and pop shop's not going to be able to afford all that. By the way, during the lockdowns where you couldn't collect rent and you couldn't raise the rent, you couldn't evict the person, doesn't matter how much of a nuisance they were, because there were some really bad people losing their minds or committing crimes, and you couldn't do anything about it because we had a health emergency. And if you dare report some of them, sorry, we had racism as a health emergency too. You can't do anything about it, despite the fact that this person was being a danger to themselves and a danger to the tenants there. You as a property owner could not do anything about it, but the tenants could hold you liable if anything happens to them. The police didn't do anything. No one could do anything, and you're blamed for all these problems that LA created. Again, speaking from experience. So, you couldn't raise the rent, and you couldn't kick anybody out that could pay the rent to replace them with someone that could pay the rent. But you were forced to pay the utilities to make sure they remained on. You are forced to pay the insurance to make sure that's not canceled and no foreclosure happens, because there's a trigger that happens if you cancel your insurance. If you cannot pay the insurance, then the insurance lapses, and when it's canceled, it triggers an effect, because if you're paying a mortgage, the mortgage company on their list of agreements that you signed said you need to have insurance here, because if you don't, now you're triggering the bank to move in. In other words, they could repossess the property, which they do. You don't have to fall behind on your mortgage for that to happen. You have to have a lapse in your contract. They can enforce that on you. You can't enforce lapses in contracts to the tenants, because everything's present for them, because you are the super rich landlord and you need to, check your privilege. It's egregious, folks. And what LA has been doing is insane. So the LA Unified School District has the power to tax. Did you know that? So they have a power to tax, so they can call their own special election. And they've done so multiple times over the previous years. The special elections that they will call for is to put a tax on square footage of improvements on a lot of property. So the lot is one thing, like the parcel that the property sits on. That's a lot. It can be 25 feet wide, 50 feet deep. Let's just use that as an example, okay? It's a rectangle. Let's say it's a rectangle parcel. They were trying to tax not the square footage of the lot. They wanted to put a tax based on the calculations of how many square feet of livable space in the building. And if you had multiple units, holy smokes, they're trying to make bang for the buck here. So sometimes they get their way, sometimes they didn't, but they have the power to call the special elections to do that. The LA City Council and also the County Board of Supervisors, which oversees county. So there's multiple levels to all this. There's the County of Los Angeles. There's an incorporated and unincorporated sections. Or in other words, they have their own little governance and all that. Then LA, which has incorporated and unincorporated areas too. So the unincorporated areas of Los Angeles do not fall under a rent stabilization ordinance. The incorporated do. So these are the important things to look, because there's multiple maps for LA. There's the general map, there's the ZEMAS map, there's the incorporated and unincorporated. So then you know what goes where and how, and which block falls under these rules or don't. It's insane how much bureaucracy exists in the Marxist city of LA. These are communist run, okay? They're not even hiding it. They're telling you what they're doing. And they want to eliminate private property. They're going so far as, in the name of EV, which is kind of funny now because I'm sure they're anti-Tesla now, but in the name of EV, they made 30% of, at least a third of the parking in Los Angeles required to be for EV. And that was years ago when EV wasn't really a thing. So that was a way for them to reduce the amount of congestion traffic in Los Angeles. Furthermore, to add to the mix, to force you onto greener ways to commute within the Los Angeles, they eliminated lanes of traffic to make it for bicycles. Like, dude, this is Wilshire Boulevard. This is Santa Monica Boulevard. High traffic streets, and you're reducing almost everything, funneling into one lane for each side of traffic. This is pathetic. But that's one way. Like, well, take the bus. Well, it's going to take even longer because you still got to sit through the damn thing. It's really insane how they went about to try to institute different things. And have you ever heard of Klaus Schwab, the James Bond villain from the World Economic Forum? Not that he had his hand in this, but he was highlighting the example that LA was doing. That by 2035, LA wanted to be, or was it by 2030? They wanted to be private car ownership free. That means LA no longer you could own a car. Everything has to be leased or whatever, because it'll be like Ubers or taxis that'll be doing all the ferrying, because it'll be just so difficult to just move in Los Angeles that you're forced into public transit, or you're forced onto these rideshare programs. And the goal is to turn to like LA freeways into parks. That's what he said about a couple of years ago. I played that clip before, and I intend to do so when I'm doing more lives for the month of April. It looks like they just wrapped up. Okay, so what? Oh wow, yeah, it is up on time, dude. That was an hour. That's an hour long thing. So I'm leaving a link in the description for if you're watching on Rumble, YouTube. I don't think X has a description, but I'm sure I'll get it out to you guys. Let me close this thing here. Okay, and I guess I'll bring myself to the forefront. I'm exhausted, by the way, so I'll look a little worse for wear. Okay, so if you go over to Rumble, YouTube, in the description is the link to that webinar, and you can watch it in full and then check out the Q&A. Okay, I needed to hear Dennis Block, and I had to live react to that because I was just made myself aware of this just cause ordinance fee. So these agencies have a power to just impose registration fees on landlords, and they just come up with this gobbledygook way of calculating the whole thing, which is just bonkers. And what we're seeing play out is just the continuing punishment of property owners, which is why you're going to see more of them that cannot tolerate this anymore, because they either can't afford it, they can't collect or anything like that, sell off their property to private equity firms or to commercial real estate companies, and then they move out of here because they're trying to rebuild somewhere else. I have friends that are looking to move to Tennessee, and as I said in an interview that I had with a previous guest who asked me if I have any plans to leave California, like, no, I'm here until they throw me out. And there's even another guest that I had on that he just went to New York because he has a thing this weekend, and he posted, "This is why I still live in communist California." And the guy is way more outspoken than I am, and he's like, "That's why I live in California." It's like, see, there's so much beauty. The state is worth fighting for. We technically still have the most registered Republicans and or conservatives in the country, but we're not mobilized. And I have to give credit to the quartering. I was tuning into Louder with Crowder, or part of the lineup on Rumble. And they had the quartering on because he's in Wisconsin about this whole big election that's happening there locally. That's why it matters. And the quartering is something really poignant. He says, yeah, these Trump supporting Republicans, they know how to mobilize for the presidential election, but they don't really mobilize for the local elections. Like, amen, exactly. I wish more people paid attention to that. They should be doing more about that, because we have right now, I think Nicole Sheridan was part of the credit to get this ball rolling with Recall Karen Bass. Look, you can recall Karen Bass. Here's the problem. She is only the figurehead. It's the system that's the problem. What did any of you do about the county board of supervisors? What did any of you do regarding the district attorney? There's a little bit of good news that came out of the district attorney by getting rid of Gascon, because you can't get any worse than Gascon. Okay, that's like just the worst. But that little improvement is, well, fine. I'll give it to you, a little bit of an improvement. But when it's the system that's the problem, that is what we need to face here. You can remove Karen Bass. You can spend all the money to recall her, but who's going to replace her? And will it even fix the system? I don't hear anybody trying to address the failures of the LA City Council, the County Board of Supervisors, or just the whole general Los Angeles apparatus. No one's talking about that. Everybody's just trying to hold Karen Bass accountable. Yes, hold her accountable, but she isn't. She's only part of the problem. She isn't the problem. It's all of LA. She just signs it. Unless there could be a stopgap, nothing's going to change in Los Angeles. Just like this whole recall Gavin Newsom thing. We're going to recall him again, replace him with who? He's about to be termed out anyway. And you know who's possibly in consideration to replace Gavin Newsom? I didn't think you could get worse than Gavin. Yes, keep an eye on the woman that might be replacing him. And here's the thing. I said, because some of you are probably tuning in, you're not even from Los Angeles, or maybe not even California. Like, what does it matter? Where California goes, so goes the rest of the country. All of you on the right very well know that Gavin Newsom is making a play at the presidency. Okay? You want to California the rest of America? That's my point. Where California goes, so goes the rest of the country. You don't want Gavin Newsom anywhere near that White House. So I hope you pay more attention to your local elections, folks, because this is insane. California wants to just remove private property rights, and that's where our freedoms begin. And that'll ultimately, if we yield on that, because there's only one law left, and that was the one we almost lost with Proposition 33 last year, but we won. But it'll come up again next year for sure, and the elections after that. Costa-Hawkins, the last law that protects private property homeownership. It's That's what makes my job hard as in real estate. How can I just inform people to buy when the state is going to do everything they can to punish that person for having bought? So that's why I do this. I try to educate you. This is probably the stuff that's the least watched of my content, and yet somehow among the most important. In that I hope people are actually paying more attention to this now, especially after the fires, because the rebuilding is going to matter. And people just want to feed their freaking conspiracy theory stuff. Like, I don't give a damn about your conspiracy theories. I truly don't. Left or right, I don't care. What I care about is my fellow Angelino, my fellow Orange Countyan. I don't even know how to say that, but San Diegans, whatever. We have these weird terminologies here, but I care about my fellow Californians. My point, okay? And we need to be educated better about our stuff that happens locally, so we can avoid the pitfalls that just befell us. And people that don't learn are doomed to repeat the history. So that's why I do what I do. And I appreciate you for tuning into this. This was not something that I had planned. I saw it at the last minute and I knew I had to do it. But anyway, this is where I'll leave it. For those of you that have not been aware, I've been doing a lot of live streaming on Rumble recently. I call them study streams and relaxing music. I've been playing soundtracks while I take my continuing education courses online. And I just have a few more hours to go. So I do intend to be doing those live streams because that's a way to hold me accountable and keep me awake. There's been some lively conversations. One of them that I'm clipping out because it was like 1:30 a.m. and I went until like 2. So it's like a 1 hour section of fact checking some real estate myths that are out there, and I'll be airing that part on Monday. So stay tuned for that. Like, share, subscribe to stay in the know wherever it is that you're watching this. I appreciate you all. This went out to LinkedIn. This went out to YouTube, X, DLive, Kick, X. I said X, right? Who else? Twitch, Locals, Rumble. It went out to all of you. So thank you, everybody, wherever you are, however you've been tuning in. I intend to do more of this in April once everything has settled down in the background to get back into production. I'll be having guests on and things like that. And who knows, I'll maybe consider doing some giveaways depending on which benchmarks or markers I hit or milestones. But you're welcome to join my live streams. I usually have the microphone on mute when I'm playing the music and taking the classes, but I give some, I share a monologue at the beginning and then I wrap things up at the end. Normally I talk about the music or the class that I took or both. So I just thought I'd let you know about that and just give you some behind the scenes update as I do it. But that's it. Thank you very much. I appreciate you all. I'll see you live on Rumble. Sure hope so. And I gotta go. So have a good weekend, everybody. Let me get into Rumble Studio to cut the feed.